Welcome to my channel. In this video I will show you the global version, the original, brand new top selling power supply product on Amazon and Aliexpress with discount price. A complex programmable logic device, CPLD, is a great piece of hardware to have in your repertoire. As its name implies, you can program these chips to serve the logic functions you need. This might be replacing an obsolete chip, or maybe just a way to learn and try different techniques. What better way to learn than to get your hands on a CPLD and give it a try? I created a CPLD module with the intent of being able to plug it into lots of things, including solderless breadboards. But I screwed up. It seems that the plug-in space available on a solderless breadboard is 1.1. I had made the footprint 1 wide, leaving no room for a row of wires on both sides. But let me back up and show more about what I'm doing. I wanted to make a programmable piece of logic that could be built as a kit. One could easily solder at home, could be programmed in circuit, and could work at 3.3 or 5 volts. The onboard oscillator is included, so that the CPLD can do things statefully and create fast counters on its own, without the need for an external clock. If an external clock is available, the higher speed clock on the module can be used to create a clock event on each rising or falling edge of the external clock, and still abide by the guidelines for CPLD FPGAs that says that you really should use the internal global clock network and not drive a clock input asynchronously. This oscillator is rated for a supply voltage between 1.8 and 5.5 volts. If you watch the video, you will see me discuss my personal preference for how I treat the enable-in pin on an oscillator. Simply put, I tend to leave it floating after I check with the spec sheet that doing so is legal. The kind of reasons that flit through my mind when dealing with this sort of function include the fact that I don't like to tie an input pin directly to a power rail if I can help it, i.e. I prefer to use a series resistor that would limit current during transients, even if it is not supposed to be needed. Over the years I have seen problems in production, mass quantities, where occasionally something like power cycling will allow a pin tied directly to a power rail to have a higher voltage than the chip itself, which is bad. Lastly, with a pin tied to a power rail through a resistor, whether power or ground, one can change their mind later and use the pin. This is especially true in my experience for unused gates, which, as you probably know, should never be left floating or unconnected. By using a pull-up, you have a point where you can connect a signal, and like power cycling will allow a pin tied directly to a power rail to have a higher voltage than the chip itself, which is bad. Lastly, with a pin tied to a power rail through a resistor, whether power or ground, one can change their mind later and use the pin. This is especially true in my experience for unused gates, which, as you probably know, should never be left floating or unconnected. By using a pull-up, you have a point where you can connect a signal and use the gate without having to cut copper. Traces. The 10-pin connector and a handful of resistors comprise the programming circuit. If all of the resistors were pull-ups, I would use a resistor network. Alas, 1 is to ground. To do a copper pour for ground, and sometimes power, as long as the board lends itself to it. Sometimes the pour gets so broken up that it may actually induce issues or just be sloppy in the end result. So again, a copper pour is a tool, but needs to be managed. Many, if not most, CAD packages these days include a 3D view of the end product. Though the accuracy of the image, it is only as accurate as the 3D models used to represent the parts. Here it can see where I select 3D model for the 44-pin socket, the programming connector, and the oscillator. Here are some of the 3D packages I like to use of utilities that rely on boundary scan description language, BSDL, to create the symbol. Most of the big vendors have BSDL files available for their mainstream parts, and these allow you to create symbols and footprints semi-automatically. Like any piece of automation, it needs to be treated like a tool and may need further massaging for best results. In this case, I let it list the pins alphabetically, which is almost random when it comes to tracing a pin on the board. Let's just say I was in a hurry that day. Why you pay for those shortcuts at some point down the road? When I go to revise this module, I will be sure and give it a pin placement that matches the part itself, so that knowing where to put your scope probe is as easy as glancing at the schematic symbol. Disclaimers: these choices may be out of date. All of these products may not be in stores. We don't know when this will be back in stock. You need to go Top Power Supply 2023 review link to see the most recent updates to the list. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to this channel.